Jimmy stood alone in his spacious, upscale apartment, clutching an ornate invitation. The gold-embossed lettering spelled out what he had been dreading: Clara and Michael invite you to their wedding. His ex-girlfriend. Getting married. A familiar ache settled in his chest as he sank onto the leather couch. Clara had left a year ago, saying he was married to his career, always prioritizing boardrooms over her. Back then, Jimmy had shrugged it off as inevitable. She deserved someone who could give her time and attention. Now, holding that invitation, his indifference seemed to crumble, replaced by a hollow sense of loss. The thought of walking into the event alone felt unbearable. That afternoon he wandered aimlessly through the city. The streets bustled with life: taxi horns, hurried conversations, shop windows gleaming in the sun, but Jimmy barely noticed. Then, on a quiet corner, something pulled his attention: a woman sitting on the curb, her shoulders slightly hunched yet dignified, like a queen in exile. Her clothes were worn, her hair untidy, but there was a softness in her expression, an unexpected smile that caught him off guard. It was the kind of smile that didn't come from circumstance, but from a deep-rooted kindness that hardship couldn't steal away. He stopped, surprising even himself. "Hi," he said, walking toward her, unsure of what he hoped to gain from this exchange. "My name's Jimmy." The woman looked up, startled, though her guarded eyes quickly softened. "Hello, I'm Anna," she replied gently. Her voice was quiet but steady, and her smile, though small, felt warm like a patch of sunlight breaking through clouds. Jimmy didn't know why he stayed. Maybe it was her calm energy, or the way she held herself despite the worn-out jacket draped around her shoulders. They began to talk, words flowing more easily than he expected. Anna's voice carried quiet strength as she spoke of struggles: how life had unraveled after losing her job, how a series of cruel twists had taken her from stability to sleeping on cold city benches. Yet, remarkably, she shared her story without bitterness. Hope, though faint, still flickered in her tone. Jimmy was mesmerized. For so long he had been surrounded by polished people with rehearsed smiles, but Anna was real. Her resilience stirred something dormant inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Then, before he could second-guess himself, the words tumbled out. "Would you come to a wedding with me?" Anna blinked, as though she misheard. "A wedding?" "Yes," Jimmy nodded, smiling awkwardly. "My ex-girlfriend's wedding. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I could use the company. And you deserve a day to feel special, no strings attached. I'll make sure you have a beautiful dress, a great meal, and maybe an evening to forget everything else for a while." For a moment, Anna said nothing, clearly weighing his bizarre offer. Finally, the corner of her lips lifted in a small smile. "All right, Jimmy. I'll go with you." He smiled back, his chest unexpectedly lighter. Neither of them realized it then, but this impulsive decision would spark a series of moments that neither could have predicted. The following day, Jimmy took Anna to an upscale boutique nestled in the heart of the city. As they walked through the ornate glass doors, Anna hesitated, clearly out of her element. The boutique's walls were lined with designer dresses and glittering jewelry, shimmering under chandeliers that seemed far too grand for anyone's reality. "It's beautiful," she whispered, almost to herself. Jimmy smiled, his presence steady beside her. "You deserve this, Anna. Let's find something perfect." At first, the boutique staff glanced at her with thinly veiled judgment, her worn shoes and tired coat betraying her circumstances. But Jimmy's sharp tone made his intentions clear: she's here to find the best. Treat her like the queen she is. Their attitudes shifted immediately. Dresses in silk and chiffon flowed past Anna's fingertips as assistants flitted around, bringing shoes and accessories to match. She was ushered into a chair, where stylists began to work their magic hair twisted into soft waves, makeup kissed onto her features. Anna sat silently, her heart a storm of emotions: nerves, disbelief, and against all odds excitement. When they finally helped her into a midnight blue gown that shimmered like stars, she turned to the mirror. Anna froze. The woman looking back at her seemed almost unrecognizable. She was poised, radiant, confident. A wave of emotion swelled in her chest. She hadn't felt this version of herself in years. Jimmy stood a few steps away, watching her quietly. "Thank you, Jimmy," Anna said, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know how to explain it, but this feels good." His smile was genuine and warm. "You're more than what life's thrown at you, Anna. It's about time you saw that too." That evening, in a cozy corner of a quiet cafe, they shared pieces of themselves they hadn't shown anyone in years. Anna spoke of her past, the loneliness of losing everything, the kindness of strangers who reminded her not all hope was lost. Jimmy listened intently, his respect for her deepening with each word. In return, Jimmy opened up about his own regrets. He spoke of Clara, of the way his ambition had stolen time he couldn't get back. For the first time, he admitted how much it had hurt, how much he had lost. Anna didn't judge him. Instead, she offered quiet understanding, a balm to wounds he hadn't even realized were still raw. Somewhere between their shared stories and quiet laughter, something unspoken grew between them, a bond stitched together by respect, honesty, and the simple comfort of being seen. As they left the cafe, Jimmy looked at Anna walking beside him, her quiet strength lighting up the night. For the first time in years, he felt something more powerful than regret. He felt hope. And as Anna smiled back at him, he knew she felt it too. The morning of Clara's wedding arrived, crisp and bright. As Anna emerged from the bedroom in a gown that shimmered softly under the light, she looked almost unrecognizable. But this transformation was not just fabric deep. The woman who stood before the mirror now carried herself with an air of quiet dignity and newfound confidence, a far cry from the fragile soul Jimmy had first encountered on the city streets. Jimmy couldn't hide his admiration as his gaze swept over her. His pride in her journey, from worn-down hopelessness to a woman of elegance and strength, swelled within him. "Are you ready?" he asked gently, extending his arm toward her. Anna turned, her lips lifting into a determined smile. "Yes, I am." They left together, stepping into the unknown, unafraid of what the day might hold. Neither of them imagined that their entrance would soon ripple through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. The wedding venue was a grand tapestry of wealth and beauty. Crystal chandeliers glistened overhead, and a string quartet filled the space with notes that hovered delicately in the air. Guests dressed in tailored suits and silk gowns stood in small clusters, murmuring over glasses of champagne. But all that chatter faded into silence the moment Jimmy and Anna walked through the gilded doors. The room stilled as heads turned to take in the scene. Jimmy, the ex-boyfriend no one expected to show up, at least not like this. And Anna, radiant in her deep blue gown, her head held high as though she had belonged to this world all along. She moved with an unshakable calm, as though every whisper, every stare was beneath her notice. Jimmy felt it too. The woman beside him was not just a guest at a wedding, she was a statement. At the far end of the room, Clara stood greeting guests with her new husband. When she caught sight of Jimmy and Anna, her polished smile wavered, just for an instant. Her eyes flitted between them, widening ever so slightly, as if trying to make sense of what she was seeing. It wasn't just Anna's presence that rattled Clara, it was the way Jimmy looked at her, as though she were the only person in the room. Jimmy moved through the crowd, introducing Anna to old acquaintances. The polite smiles she received were thin, and the air buzzed with barely concealed curiosity. "And this is Anna," Jimmy said again and again, his voice warm, unwavering. Anna met each gaze head-on, her smile gracious yet measured. There was no fluster, no shrinking away from the weight of judgment that lingered in their eyes. She had endured far worse in her life, and she would not allow a room full of strangers to diminish her now. Eventually, Clara approached, her poise practiced but strained. "Jimmy, it's good to see you," she said with carefully measured sweetness. Her gaze flicked to Anna. "And you must be." Jimmy's tone held unmistakable pride. "This is Anna. She's my date for the evening." Clara forced a smile, but her discomfort hung between them like a shadow. "Anna, it's a pleasure. You look lovely." "Thank you," Anna replied calmly, her voice steady. "You've planned a beautiful wedding." The words were polite, but there was no mistaking the strength beneath them. Anna's presence was an anomaly that unsettled Clara, who struggled to hide the flicker of jealousy in her expression. She had expected Jimmy to come alone, perhaps looking defeated, nursing the wounds of their past. Instead, he stood beside Anna, relaxed and content, happier than Clara had ever seen him. The evening carried on as the orchestra began a slow, melodic waltz. Jimmy turned to Anna, his eyes softening. "May I have this dance?" Anna hesitated, the elegant room suddenly feeling too grand, too surreal, but Jimmy's extended hand and quiet reassurance gave her courage. "Yes," she said softly, allowing him to lead her onto the polished floor. As they swayed beneath the warm light of the chandeliers, Anna felt the weight of her doubts slip away. The music wrapped around them, the voices of the crowd dulled into silence, and for a brief moment, the world shrank to just the two of them. Clara stood on the edge of the crowd, watching. Her chest tightened as she took in the scene, Jimmy smiling, truly smiling at Anna, his hand gentle yet certain on her back. She had convinced herself that leaving Jimmy was the right choice, but seeing him now so at ease, so alive, a wave of regret crashed over her. She had let him go, and now she couldn't help but wonder if she had lost something irreplaceable. For Jimmy, the dance was a quiet revelation. What had started as a spontaneous act born of impulse, and perhaps a little pride, had become something deeply real. Holding Anna in his arms, he felt something he hadn't felt in years' peace. Her presence was more than a distraction or a way to make Clara notice him. Anna was herself, strong, kind, resilient, and Jimmy couldn't ignore the way his heart now leaned toward her. As the final notes of the song hung in the air, Jimmy looked down at Anna, searching her face. This night, this moment was only the beginning. Later in the evening, Clara found Jimmy alone near the garden's entrance, away from the noise of the reception. Her steps were hesitant, her voice tight. "Jimmy, can we talk for a minute?" He turned to face her, his expression open but calm. "Of course, Clara. What's on your mind?" She faltered, then finally said, "I didn't expect you to bring someone like Anna tonight. It's obvious she's not from our usual crowd. Aren't you worried about what people will say?" Jimmy's brow furrowed, a flicker of disappointment passing through his eyes. "Clara, Anna is extraordinary. She doesn't come from privilege, but her worth isn't defined by wealth. Why should it matter to you or anyone where she comes from?" Before Clara could reply, Anna appeared, having overheard the exchange. Her steps were light but purposeful as she approached. "Excuse me, Clara," Anna said softly, her voice unwavering. "I know I'm not what you expected to see here tonight, and that's all right. Jimmy invited me because he sees me for who I really am, not what I wear or where I came from. I've made mistakes, just like everyone else, but tonight I'm here for myself too, to prove that I'm more than my circumstances." Clara's response faltered as Anna's quiet strength seemed to disarm her. She had expected intimidation, not resolve. Jimmy turned to Anna, pride shining clearly in his expression. In that moment, he saw her fully, not just as someone who had overcome hardship, but as a woman who was unshakable in her grace. For the first time that evening, Clara realized the truth: Jimmy had moved on, and what he'd found was something far more real than she had ever offered. The quiet exchange didn't escape notice. Guests nearby, who had spent much of the evening casting judgmental glances and murmuring behind their glasses of champagne, now saw Anna through a different lens. The whispers that had been sharp and skeptical softened into something else: admiration. Anna's calm dignity in the face of confrontation had left its mark on everyone who witnessed it. Clara, her composure rattled for the first time that night, managed a tight smile. I should. I need to get back to the other guests, she mumbled hastily before excusing herself. Her retreat was hurried, her confidence shaken. Jimmy turned to Anna, his expression tender, his voice low. Thank you, Anna, you didn't have to do that. Anna met his gaze, her smile gentle but steady. I know, but I wanted to. You've done so much for me tonight, Jimmy. The least I could do was stand by you. Jimmy studied her in that moment, this woman who had stepped into his life so unexpectedly, and yet felt as though she had always belonged there. Whatever desire he'd had to prove something to Clara, or to anyone else, had vanished completely. The focus of the night had shifted. This wasn't about the past anymore. It was about Anna. And it was about the future. As the evening wore on and the hum of conversation mellowed, Clara found Jimmy standing alone by the edge of the garden terrace. The last of the guests mingled in dwindling circles under the glow of fairy lights, but Jimmy stood apart, his thoughts somewhere far away. Clara approached, her steps uncertain, her usual confidence replaced by something far more fragile. When Jimmy turned at the sound of her heels on the stone, he saw an expression he hadn't seen on her face before: vulnerability. Jimmy, she began softly, her voice trembling just enough to betray her nerves. Can we talk? He nodded, his expression open but unreadable. Of course, Clara, what's on your mind? She took a shaky breath, as though gathering every ounce of courage she had. I've been thinking, ever since I saw you with Anna tonight. I realized something. I made a mistake. Her voice wavered, but she pressed on. When I left, I thought I was doing the right thing. You were so focused on your work, and I convinced myself you didn't care enough about us. But seeing you tonight, seeing how you've changed, she trailed off, her voice thick with regret. I shouldn't have let you go, Jimmy. Jimmy's brow furrowed slightly as he listened. For a moment he felt a flicker of the old pain she'd left behind, a pain he had carried longer than he cared to admit. But as Clara spoke, that weight began to dissolve. He waited until her words settled, and then he replied, his voice gentle but firm. Clara, I appreciate your honesty. Truly I do. What we had was real, and I'll always be grateful for it. But it's over. I've moved on, and I found peace with that. Clara blinked, as though she hadn't expected such resolute calm. Her voice was faint when she murmured, I see. I'm sorry, Jimmy. I really am. I wish you all the best. Jimmy offered her a small, genuine smile. Thank you, Clara. I wish you happiness too. She hesitated just long enough for her sadness to show, then turned and walked back toward the lights of the party. As Jimmy watched her disappear into the crowd, he exhaled, feeling a strange sense of lightness wash over him, freedom. It was as if he'd finally put down a burden he hadn't realized he was still carrying. Clara's confession had given him something unexpected: closure. From a distance, Anna had seen the exchange. She hadn't meant to linger, but when she overheard Clara's confession and Jimmy's response, her steps faltered. For a moment, relief flooded her heart, relief that Jimmy had truly let go of his past. But then doubt crept in like an unwelcome shadow. Was she just a symbol? A passing chapter in Jimmy's story, a way for him to prove to Clara that he'd moved on? Anna slipped quietly out to the garden, where the air was cooler and the sounds of the wedding faded into the background. She found a quiet bench tucked beneath an overgrown arch of roses and sat down, her thoughts spinning. She had come so far in such a short time. Jimmy had given her something she hadn't dared dream of: hope, a spark of self-worth she thought she'd lost. But now she couldn't ignore the quiet voice in her mind, asking questions she couldn't escape. Did Jimmy truly see her, or had she simply been swept up in his desire to move on from Clara? As the night air brushed against her face, Anna realized that she needed answers. She couldn't be someone's afterthought, or a placeholder for the past. If she was going to take a step forward with Jimmy, she needed to know that he saw her, really saw her for who she was. Not as a reaction to Clara. Not as a symbol of freedom. But as Anna. the woman who had faced her own storms and survived. Anna found Jimmy standing alone in the garden, the cool night breeze offering a welcome break from the intensity of the evening. She had spent the past hour battling her thoughts, unable to shake the conversation she'd overheard between Jimmy and Clara. Doubt weighed on her, but mingled with it was a quiet courage and need to face the questions head-on. Slowly she approached him, her footsteps light but deliberate. "Jimmy," she said softly, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I need to ask you something." Jimmy turned at the sound of her voice, his gaze catching the seriousness in her expression. He nodded, his tone gentle. "Of course, Anna. What's on your mind?" Anna took a slow, deliberate breath, as though bracing herself. "Was I just part of a plan tonight? Did you bring me here just to prove something to Clara?" To make her jealous, her voice trembled slightly, but there was strength beneath it. "Because if that's the case, I need to know. I won't be a tool for someone else's closure." The words hit Jimmy like a sharp wind, and his heart sank. It hadn't occurred to him how his actions might look through her eyes, how his impulsive invitation could have been so easily misinterpreted. He stepped closer, his face softening with regret and understanding. "Anna," he said earnestly, his voice low and full of conviction, "I'm sorry if I gave you that impression. That was never my intention. When I asked you to come tonight, I'll admit I wasn't thinking clearly. Maybe there was some pride, some defiance in the moment. But what I didn't expect was—" He paused, searching for the right words. How much I would come to admire you." Anna looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of insincerity. "So this wasn't just about Clara," she pressed, her voice quiet but firm. Jimmy shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "No, Clara is my past, and tonight I finally let that go. You, Anna, you've shown me something I didn't know I was missing. Your strength, your kindness. The way you carried yourself tonight. It's opened my eyes. I'm not thinking about Clara anymore. I'm thinking about you, how much I want to get to know you, really know you. Not just tonight, but beyond that." A wave of relief swept over Anna, and her heart, which had been tight with uncertainty, softened. There was something in Jimmy's words, something raw and honest, that allowed her to believe him. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to hope that this could be real. "Thank you for telling me the truth," Anna replied, her voice quieter now but full of warmth. "I care about you too, Jimmy. I just needed to be sure this wasn't—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. Temporary. Jimmy reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "It's not, Anna," he promised, his tone firm but tender. "I don't know what the future looks like, but I know this: I want to spend more time with you. I want to see where this goes." In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a quiet understanding, a bond that neither had expected when the night began. It wasn't just about leaving the past behind anymore. It was about what lay ahead. Inside the reception hall, the glittering lights and murmured conversations seemed suddenly distant. Jimmy glanced at Anna, who looked back at him with a small, knowing smile. "Why don't we get out of here?" he suggested, his voice light but purposeful. "Let's go somewhere else, just the two of us, somewhere quieter." Anna's smile deepened, her heart lifting in a way it hadn't in years. "I'd like that," she replied softly. And so they slipped out quietly, leaving behind the whispered gossip, the prying eyes, and the clinking champagne glasses. They stepped into the cool night, where the air felt fresher and the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter. As they walked, their hands brushing, Jimmy felt something shift inside him, something hopeful. "Anna," he began, glancing at her, his voice low and sincere. "I don't want tonight to be just a single moment. I want to support you, help you reach whatever dreams you've been holding back. You're so much more than you've let yourself believe." Anna looked up at him, her eyes shining. The warmth in his voice filled the spaces in her heart that had been empty for too long. "You don't know what that means to me, Jimmy," she whispered. For the first time in years, I feel like I have a chance. A real chance to build something better. And to have someone believe in me, it's more than I ever thought I deserved." As they walked together, they began to really talk. Anna spoke of the dreams she had buried under years of struggle, the things she wanted to learn, the life she wanted to build for herself. Jimmy listened intently, offering ideas and encouragement, his admiration for her deepening with every word. For Anna, it was as though each step made her stronger, her confidence growing in ways she hadn't thought possible. Back at the wedding, Clara watched from afar as Jimmy and Anna disappeared into the night. A pang of regret tightened her chest, a feeling sharper than she was prepared for. She had assumed, perhaps arrogantly, that Jimmy's feelings for her would linger forever, that he would show up tonight alone, carrying the weight of what they'd lost. But instead, he had moved on and was someone who radiated a quiet strength Clara couldn't ignore. Clara realized, in that moment, that she had let something precious slip through her fingers. What she had dismissed as fleeting had been genuine, and now it was gone. As Jimmy and Anna strolled hand in hand beneath the open sky, the hum of the city fading into the distance, neither of them looked back. For the first time in a long time, they were walking towards something new, a future that felt brighter, filled with possibility. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And as they walked, the past fell away, leaving room for hope to take its place. As Jimmy and Anna reached the edge of the garden path, the world around them seemed to pause. The soft glow of the city lights stretched out before them, twinkling like distant stars against the velvet darkness. It was a quiet, lingering moment, one that felt like the close of an old chapter, yet the gentle promise of something new and unexpected. Anna turned toward Jimmy, her fingers curling softly around his hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "This feels like the beginning of something. Something good," she said, a fragile hope shining through her words. Jimmy looked down at her, his smile warm, genuine, tinged with an optimism he hadn't felt in years. "It does," he agreed, his voice low and steady. "And I can't wait to see where it takes us." They stood there for a moment longer, suspended in the quiet magic of the night. For the first time in a long time, neither of them felt defined by where they had come from, nor burdened by the weight of the past. Instead, their hearts looked forward, toward the unknown road ahead, one paved not with guarantees, but with possibility. Hand in hand, Jimmy and Anna stepped into the night, leaving the echoes of the wedding far behind. They didn't need the approval of prying eyes, nor did they carry the ghosts of what might have been. All that mattered was the shared connection between them, a bond shaped by resilience, trust, and the quiet realization that life had more to offer than either of them had dared to believe. The journey ahead wouldn't be without its challenges, but they were no longer walking alone. Together they carried with them something far greater than the sum of their struggles, a hope for love, growth, and a future filled with endless possibilities. And as they disappeared into the night, their footsteps light and unhurried, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself were blessing the beginning of something beautiful. As the evening lights fade and the echoes of the past fall silent, Jimmy and Anna's story reminds us of one powerful truth: life always offers second chances. This is not just a tale of two people finding their way to each other, it is a story about hope, resilience, and the courage to embrace new beginnings. Jimmy, once burdened by lost love, and Anna, a woman whose spirit refused to be broken by life's trials, crossed paths at an unexpected moment. Together they showed us that our past does not define who we are. What matters is how we choose to move forward. In a world often clouded by judgment and regret, they found clarity, peace, and the promise of something beautiful waiting ahead. This story is about healing, about seeing the value in others when no one else does, and about believing in the possibilities of tomorrow. It's a quiet reminder that love, in its purest form, can transform even the darkest of moments into light. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with those who might need a little hope today. Every like and share helps us continue to bring you heartfelt stories that inspire and uplift. And now we'd love to hear from you. What part of Jimmy and Anna's journey resonated with you the most? Did their story remind you of a time when you too chose to embrace a new beginning? Leave your thoughts, reflections, or even your own stories in the comments below. Your voice is what makes this community so special, and we can't wait to hear from you. Thank you for being here, for sharing your time, and for believing in the power of storytelling.